You're watching America's Entrepreneur on YouTube. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Aaron Spatz, and each week we interview entrepreneurs, industry experts, and other high achievers as they detail their personal and professional journeys. Before we jump in, hit the subscribe button and be sure to hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we release a new episode. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to America's Entrepreneur this week. We're going to jump right into today's show. Really pleased to be able to welcome a fellow U.S. Marine. Turns out we're both fellow Marine artillery officers, and so that with great things are going to happen. I mean, I can already tell this is going to be a great conversation. But super excited to welcome to the show Mike McAlinden. Mike served our country before jumping out and pursuing business opportunities, and so his company is Greenlight National. We're going to learn a ton more about that, a ton more about his journey. And so, Mike, I just want to welcome you, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Aaron, thanks so much for having me. Longtime fan.
Oh man, I so sincerely appreciate that. It's a true delight. I love getting to talk with just amazing people like yourself and get to hear your story. So, I mean, take us back to the beginning. Like what drove you to serve our country? We'll just start there.
Man, I didn't know it was going to go well. All right. So, well, back then, my dad was in the FBI. He retired maybe 10 years ago now, but, I wanted to get into the FBI. And so when I went to college, I remember my freshman year, I called my dad and I said, Dad, what do I, got to do to get into the FBI? And he said, well, we have a lot of lawyers, and we have a lot of accountants. And I was like, okay, no. And then he said, and we have a lot of Marine officers. And so I looked, further into that, contacted my OSO and started the process. And, there's, my grandfather served, there's some other more patriotic, reasons, but
sure.
At the same time, I wanted to do something that I could use as a stepping stool, after college, and the Marine Corps kind of fit the bill.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. So your family. So like, yeah, I kind of skipped ahead there. So, where were you raised? Like, what was your family environment like?
I was raised on the south side of Chicago.
Okay.
Kind of, middle class neighborhood. It's a neighborhood called Beverly. Shout out to Beverly, on the south side. Family structure. I've got a twin sister, an older sister who's kind of like our triplet, and then a younger brother. And we're all competitive. We all play sports growing up. Our parents are still together, and we all live like right here. So even our aunts and uncles, we probably got 30 family members that live, within 10 minutes of us.
Wow.
So it's kind of a small town environment in a big city, which is really nice. And it was nice growing up, but now as a parent and a father, I really appreciate it and see the value of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so special, man. It's so and especially, with military experience, realizing what you lose, right? When you're gone, and being able to come back and get to experience that. It's incredibly special. It really is. And so it's really cool. You got the entire family there, and just, I mean, family dynamics can be a whole nother topic.
No doubt. But you touched it. Like my guys my contemporaries who are getting out now, or like 18, 19, 20 years, you see the travel, and I'm lucky, I got out and I'm here with my family. You see the sacrifice, on the outside looking in, and I really appreciate what those guys do who stay in for the long haul.
For sure.
I don't know how to do it.
No, it's a lot. It definitely is. So let's kind of like then shift gears just ever so slightly and kind of give me a little bit of a sense of, so you were in, you served in our U.S. military, and then you had previously mentioned the FBI, but after getting out, you decided to go into business. So like, where did the entrepreneurial bug kind of bite you?
I feel like I've always kind of had it, a lot of your other guests have had similar small businesses growing up. Like I was cutting lawns, and charging $20 a lawn, and making money that way. And so when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, I had friends who were a generation of officer ahead of me that were getting out, I got to see them get into the business world, and also you get pulled towards the military and paramilitary, FBI, NSA, all that stuff. And so I got to see that, and I decided as I was getting out that I had time, to join the FBI if I really wanted to do that. But let me give the civilian side a shot, And again, something that you as a Marine, as a military guy, would appreciate. I thought I could succeed, looking at the civilian world, in a competitive way. I thought I could succeed in it. And so I wanted to give it a shot. And if I failed at it, then I forget the age, but I had like 8 years or 10 years before I couldn't, apply for the FBI anymore. Yeah. And so I said, hell, I'll just give it a shot. And so when I was getting out, I went to the Lucas Group. Did you ever hear about that?
Yep.
Yeah,
sure did. Yeah.
So I had like 13 interviews, in one day, in like Chicago. You go up to you're in a hotel, you go to a hotel room, knock on a door, you open it, it's like, all right, Blue Mountain, go. You're interviewing Blue Mountain. Then you go to the next one, knock on the door, and it's like, another big company. And I remember CBRE was my last one. And like the night before, I was doing research on all these different companies, and CBRE was the largest commercial real estate company in the world. And I was like, well, it's the biggest company. There's the most money is going to this company. So I'm going to jump into that pool. And so my last interview was with this woman, executive. And I said, like, I've had 12 other interviews today. I think I'm going to get 12 other offers. But I want to work for you. I want to work for your company. And I later found out so I got hired by CBRE. I later found out that they chose somebody prior to me getting in there. And the fact that I told her I wanted to work for them, made her choose to hire 2 people instead of 1 person that day.
Wow.
Yeah. You got to ask, that's something I learned early in business, because where I grew up, you don't ask for things. You just stay quiet, and it translates to sales. Like, I'm sorry, I'm babbling now, but like,
this is great, man.
When I first started the company, I'm just selling free audits, and I'd get an audit of a building. I'd go do an audit. I'd put a proposal together, give it to them. And then I wait, and I'd be like, man, I wonder, no response, and I give it a week. I'm like, I don't want to annoy these people. I'm sure they've looked at it. They're doing other things that are more important to them. So then I'd call, and cut to today, 10 years later, I'm calling them that day, and I'm calling them the next day, and I want my answer, and I've done all this work. And for me, at least, it took a lot to get to that. Like, hey, I don't want to annoy people, to, hey, I deserve an answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. That's a really good perspective. And I love that you brought this up, because a lot of people struggle with sales. There's a lot of folks out there that do a tremendous job. They're wired for it, and they do it really well. I've had to study it a lot myself, because I think that's one area that I have struggled with. And so it's the whole, not being afraid to ask. And man, I cannot relate to that point anymore when it comes to like job interviews, and whether you're hiring somebody or you're trying to get hired. It's when people know and they sense that you have a sincere desire to be a part of their company. I mean, that it really speaks volumes. And I feel like that was definitely like your secret weapon in that job interview, is being able to make that ask. And it obviously stood out to them. I mean, it stood out to them so much that they decided to offer 2 positions instead of 1, which is really, really, really cool. So,
and where I learned that was TBS. I have a good friend, John Pettinelli. I was on vacation with him last week, and I never met him before and we were at TBS, and he went to our SPC, like staff platoon commander, as like the guy in charge, essentially, who you're at that point, you're kind of afraid to even talk to. And they all have whiteboards outside their office. And Pettinelli, and none of us have jobs at that time, and he wrote infantry, Pettinelli-infantry on this guy's thing. And I thought that was the ballsiest move. Like, I thought he was going to get kicked out of TBS because he did that. And he got pulled in and spoken to, but guess what? He got infantry. And awesome. And so there's a you can push the envelope too far, sure. But you got to ask for the business. Basically. So
how is that translated then to present day with the company? So you'd mentioned how before we get there, give everybody a quick 30,000 foot overview of Greenlight National,
Sure.
what all the company does, and then we can dive into it.
Sure. Real quick, so when I got out the first time, I worked for CBRE. I was managing warehouses, and I got involved in LEED, which is a way by which you can certify a building as sustainable. And I learned about lighting, and I learned that all my buildings, the lights that I had in these warehouses were all being phased out by energy efficiency codes. And so I learned all these things. Then I got recalled, and I went to Afghanistan and quit that job at CBRE, but I had all this knowledge. And so I don't know if you remember, but we went to Afghanistan to take over the Helmand province from the Taliban, and this is in 2009. And when I first got there, we had like a month to kind of plan the invasion, and I put a business plan together to kind of go call these property managers that I used to work with, asset managers for real estate investment trusts that I used to work for, and start selling them lighting, because I knew that all these warehouses had to be upgraded. Literally, like every warehouse in the country was going to be upgraded to LED, and 0% was upgraded. And so I put a business plan together, and I got back, at the end of 2009, and then in like February of 2010, I started the company. I was 30 years old, living in my parents' basement. I remember I was sending postcards out. I looked it up, and they said if you have your face on the postcard, you get a 30% higher return rate and all this stuff. And I was sending postcards out and just trying to sell free audits. And so anyway, so what do we do? We do LED lighting in commercial buildings. I'd say half our business is in warehouses. But we also do, you name it, municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, office buildings, small retail, everything. Everything needs to be upgraded to LED. We also do EV charging, so it's kind of the same thing. Same idea. Every building is going to be upgraded to LED. Right now, there's a 20% market penetration in industrial, so there's still 80% of the market left to go, and we think
Seriously.
There's
that much
in 10 years.
Holy cow! I thought for sure this has already hit critical mass. Like there's still like a massive total addressable market, that's available. You're saying for like warehouses, commercial buildings to upgrade their lighting to LED.
The commercial buildings is probably like 50-50, I'd say.
Okay.
Warehouses, it's 15 to 20%. So 80% of the market left. And then, the technology is evolving on LEDs. So we'll go back to old customers and try to sell them controls, because, these LED lights, if you think about them, it's actually a little computer that is up in the ceiling now, the most advanced ones. They've got sensors. They can communicate wirelessly to each other. They'll report back to you on energy use or occupancy, and so the market is expanding and it's growing. It's a good place to be. We're also trying to add other verticals. So we're doing EV charging now. We think every parking lot will have a EV charger in it, especially now that you see these companies saying they're going to go full electric vehicles by 2030. I think like Ford said 2030 and Volvo said 2028 or whatever. So we have a captive market, captive customer base that we could call on for, this additional vertical.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that wasn't too granular, but
that's perfect. This is what makes it fun. So I mean, that's a tremendous opportunity for you. And then I was going to ask you then, as you're getting the company started and you're writing these postcards and getting those mailed out and you're making calls and all that. I mean, what was your approach to people? So you're saying like you're selling free audits. Like what was like the response rate for that? What was
man.
Yeah.
So the first year I didn't sell anything, but I had a good pipeline. And like I said, I was selling free audits. So back then I had to explain to people like that a problem, like, hey, your lights are really bad and you're going to have to upgrade them and you're spending way too much energy. Then I had to teach them about the solution. So, way back in, 10 years ago when I started, I was selling more efficient fluorescent. We weren't even selling LED back then.
Okay.
But we were, able to cut people's energy cost in half. And I was, selling that. So, cut to today, and you talk to people about LED, and they say, "Oh yeah, I know about that." So they're much more familiar with it now, which makes it easier. Back then, it was just about selling free audits, and then back to the sales thing, and then following up, because I knew they were going to upgrade their lights. So for me, it was about get them the proposal and then follow up. And sometimes 3 years later, they'll be like, "Hey, hey, that guy called again, and we're upgrading our lights. Let's give him a shot at it. And I'm competing for these jobs. Then you got to learn how to win, and where your numbers have to be and margins and all that stuff. But essentially, it was just kind of get the hooks in, and then follow up. Follow up until either they go out of business or I get hit by a bus or they give me the lighting deal. One or the other.
Wow. So talk with me through that mental transformation that you described earlier, where it was like, hey, I don't want to be annoying, to now it's like, I really need an answer to this. Like, how did you cross that bridge? Like, how was that process for you?
It took a lot of coaching and watching other people and learning from others. I would hire people and I would see how they communicated with our customers. And sometimes I was like, whoa, I'm not comfortable with that. But then they'd get a positive response, and then so I'd learn, like, I was really formal in the beginning when I would communicate with my customers, heading, body, and so it took a long time to, that's instilled in you in the Marine Corps. It's instilled in you in the way, we're raised, where, you don't bother people and all these things. And so I had a lot to get over if I wanted to be successful. And it's still something I fight today. I've been able to transition to this thing where I think, like, hey, I've done all this work, for free. I've done an audit of their building. I spent hours putting a proposal together. I've used employees of my company to get this done. And all I am asking for is not money for all this, but just a yes or no, or go pound sand, say something, like literally tell me anything, but don't just ice me. And so, once I started to think of it from that perspective, years, 2 years in, and I'm like, okay, I got to call him now. But nowadays, and maybe it's because, 10 years later, I started at 30, I'm 40 now. My contemporaries who were in the civilian world when I started, they were assistant managers or something like that. Well, 10 years later, they're directors, so maybe it's a little easier for me now, to where I'm working with people that I know I'm going to get an answer from, and I'm not some, kind of peon that is just one of 5 quotes. Sure. It's still there. I see my employees struggling with it, but yeah, it took, just like everything else, it took coaching. It took me, knowing myself and seeking self-improvement, one of the leadership traits that we learn.
Yep.
And, over time I was able to get there, but it's also about communicating, it's also about, like, hey, I don't want to feel like I'm stepping on this guy's toes. There's a right way to say, give me an answer. There's a right way to say, hey, I'm not trying to bug you, but I just, I did all this work for you and I'm looking for an answer.
Sure.
And so it's also about learning that side of it.
So when, like when the company was just getting off the ground, like, what was that like? Like, what were you going through? Like, how did you get to the point where you realize, like, wow, like, this is sustainable. I actually now need to hire employees. I can afford to hire employees now. Like, what did all that look like for you?
That was like, so year one, hustle, but I didn't sell anything, but I built up a good pipeline. And then year two, I said I had $1 million in sales. And so, for me, it's about, ordering the lights and getting them to the job, but then having an electrician go there and do it. And back then I didn't have an electrician, so I had to sub it out. So, it was about finding those relationships and kind of, getting a distributor that would give me credit, and I hadn't been in business, basically like, hey, I promise you, I'll pay you, in 30-day terms and stuff like that. And so I got that figured out. I had, I was doing jobs, and I just remember it getting to a point where I couldn't keep up, on the sales side. And then I'm doing the project management side, and now I'm billing, and it just coincided, luckily, with my cousin, who is just a couple years younger than me. He had just gotten finished with his landscaping business, and I was like, "Hey, man, I need some help over here. You wanna give this a shot?" Yeah. And so he's been with me ever since, and he was a lifesaver because he took the project management side, and that's a lot of work, getting people to show up on time and getting things to show up on time. It's a lot of work. So. He was my first employee. That was year two. Over the last 10 years, we've had as many as, 20, 25 employees. I think right now we've got 20. Wow. We've grown we do almost 300 jobs a year all across the country. So, from him, we were able to build a hierarchy under, project management through me, and, I had one of my best friends was like the next hire. This guy who was in the Marines with me, he was a logistics officer. So he got out at the same time and went to Babson, and while I started the company. And then 2 years later, he graduated from Babson, and then I had this business, and so he came over, and then we split the Marine Corps, or excuse me, we split the country like the Marine Corps does. So he lives in Texas. He took the west side of the Mississippi, and I live in Chicago. I took the east side of the Mississippi. And it's funny, man. Like, again, like something you'll really appreciate, but I couldn't have started the company without the Marine Corps, because you have in the Marine Corps S1, S2, S3, S4. And that's, as admin, S2, intel, operations, logistics, S6, communications, marketing, these are all things that every company has. And so, I just kind of started the company with all those hats, but then started hiring the appropriate roles, within the company as we grew.
Wow. Yeah. And I feel like for a lot of like, so I'm going to keep trying to dig into this a little bit more, because I think this is for a lot of entrepreneurs. This is where a lot of them struggle, is that transition where you go from running it all by yourself and you're having to be like, 5 roles within 1 hour. I mean, essentially, you're doing everything, and then almost becoming a bit of a victim of your own success, because now you become in such demand that you just spreading yourself too thin now. Like things are going to start to get dropped, but you're like, well, crap, man, I can't quite hire somebody full time just yet. Maybe I can 1099 them, for now. But but so what advice would you have for people that are in that kind of a predicament, or like how did you adapt through all that?
Well, one thing you can do is, generally speaking, prepare for it. Know that in the future, where's the pool of people I'm going to pull from? And if this works out, I'm gonna eventually need to hire for this role. Who could that be? Who in my life could that be right now? And I don't know if I'm like a lot of other people that start companies, but you tend to hire people that or people in your in your circle. And even for me, like, that's worked out. I hired my cousin, and now he's at the desk next to me. But it's also not worked out. I've hired other people in my family where I had to let them go, and it's amicable, but it's like, hey, this is not working out for you. It's not working out for me. Let's figure this out. But anyway, so you just kind of you can kind of prepare and know, like, eventually I'm going to need a project manager. These are the 10 people. This is what I hope to be able to afford. How much is the project manager's, salary, and start budgeting, for that. Because for me at least, it ramped up, and I realized, I'm like, I can't do all this by myself. And I guess at some point you have to know that too,
Right.
You can't be bullheaded and just try to get through it. You'll get through it, but you'll lose customers, along the way. And even to this day, we still have to make sure that we're not spreading ourselves too thin. We have to, back then you couldn't really do that, but now you have to say no to business sometimes. If it's going to be a low margin job, if it's going to be time consuming, or it's a customer that doesn't pay for a long time and you've got other customers. So there's, as you grow, it's not like that. It's not like you don't have that fear anymore. It just develops a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. I like how you talked about just preparation. You're just starting to kind of identify all the different roles in the company. Again, this goes back to the book by Michael Gerber, the EMyth, that a lot of us have read, and it just goes back to talking about how you build the company out in a way where it would be like franchisable, like it'd be a franchisable business. And so what does that require? It requires all these different processes, all these different roles, like envisioning where it's going to be. And I guess that's the memory that you sparked for me when you said prepare, and you're talking about how you're envisioning what other roles that you're going to need to have. And I've heard this in a couple places, but where you have the reality of what today looks like, and then you have the vision of what you would like it to be in the future. It may not be a perfect vision, right? But
Sure.
You have a vision of what you'd like it to look like, and then you just start working towards that. It sounds really simple, right? But it's like, but there's a lot that goes into that.
you asked me before we started, you're like, oh, you switched from Greenlight Midwest just to Greenlight National. And the answer to why we had Greenlight Midwest was originally we were going to do some type of franchise thing where we had a Greenlight National, but then all these other regions around the country that were servicing that area, and then have region heads, in each region that were kind of like franchisees. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it followed a business model of a company that we had looked at, back then. And then as we grew, we realized, no, we want to keep it centralized. That was really decentralized, and you're kind of giving a lot of, of the decision making and executive stuff away to franchisees, where we needed to keep it centralized, because what we learned was the business was about relationships, and it's not like an annuity type business. We try to go after companies that make decisions about lots of buildings, so that they can keep coming back to us. So
smart. Yeah, that's smart, because then what you're creating for yourself is you're creating a somewhat of a recurring revenue model. Whether it's like, I get it's likely not recurring, it's project based, right? But but based on the relationships, you can kind of create a little bit of a recurring model, because hey, this guy's managing 18 different properties, we'll work on this project over here. He's like, oh, you know what, what would it take to do the same thing you just did for me here over there?
Exactly. And normalize pricing for them across the country and all that. But I will say, as a business owner, I do want more annuity type revenue. And so for me, where that comes in is like maintenance contracts, and so over the last, I'd say 5 or so years, we sell maintenance. Now, obviously LEDs, part of the sale is you don't need to maintain them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But you do, in our world, for at least property management companies and real estate investment trusts that own warehouses, they do want somebody, driving there once a month and at night and checking to make sure everything's on, and kind of doing like due diligence almost. And so those are the types of, and then if you see, some type of problem, some electrical problem, then you can give them a quote, to fix it, or, any problem, it's almost like you have eyes on. So anyway, I just want to touch on that. Like, our business is project based, it is relationship based, and we want to get more business from these customers. But as we grow from here, through the next 5 to 10 years, that's a part of the business that I think it's important, that we grow.
Yeah.
Especially if we want to exit the business.
Sure. I mean, and that creates greater value for the company. You've got longstanding contracts. I've had several M&A people on the show, and back when I was running 2 podcasts at the same time, I ran the DFW business podcast. I had a few folks on the show specifically from the M&A world. Absolutely fascinating perspective on what creates and drives value for companies that are looking to exit, and how. And so I'm like commending you now, because like, if you're thinking of exiting at some point in the future, you're thinking about it already, right? So it's like, it's not one of those things where you're like, you know what, I'd like to get out of this business by the end of this year, realizing I've only got like 4 months left of this year. It's like, probably thinking about it a little too short on your timeline there, right?
Right.
Yeah, but no, that's cool. That's creating maintenance agreements, creating that monthly recurring revenue.
There will be software in the future too that I'll be able to get annuity from, like software subscriptions, and that's not really scaled in the market yet, but I would say in the next 5 years it'll start to get into the market, and then it'll be the norm.
Yeah. What's one of the things, I'm going to ask, like the bad and the good side of this question, so it's not going to be all doom and gloom, but what's one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome since starting this business, and we may have already talked about it, but what's one of the greatest challenges that you had to overcome? You didn't maybe quite know how you're going to get through it, but hey, you're still here.
Yeah, well, a lot. I mean,
that's a perfect answer, by the way.
Where do I start? I made a lot of mistakes. I guess, like, in the beginning, I hired. We wanted to hire, like, somebody that was going to come on and have an impact right away. And how do you attract somebody like that? Well, obviously you pay a salary. You're trying to attract somebody that has a book of business that they're bringing to you. And we didn't, I'm talking 7, 8 years ago, we didn't have a big salary to pay people. What did we have? In my head back then, I thought we had additional equity, to pay to people. And so I would say in the beginning, one big mistake was bringing people on board and then, giving them deals where they had some type of equity in the business if they achieved something. Or, over the years, I've had to let those people go, and not only let them go, but also, negotiate their shares back. So, I learned that I have friends that have businesses or have, parents who have businesses that I've learned where you don't have to give away equity. You can share profit. There's other options. So like, that's something that I could have easily learned if I, got my MBA or something, but that's a dumb thing that, that I did in the beginning that I had to correct, several years later. And, we're fine now. We've survived it. There's other times where we're short on cash. I'm sure you've had other people talk about cash flow and how important that is.
Yeah.
It's weird, the business can be booming, but you could still be short on cash because your clients aren't paying, or, any myriad of reasons. Or like last year, COVID, obviously, in the pandemic, was particularly tough for us because we had to leave all of our job sites, and the way we bill people is we finish work and then we give them a bill, or we progress, we get halfway done and we give them a bill.
Yep.
I had, I think, maybe close to 30 jobs, going on, and I had to stop all of them. We had to pull all our guys off of every job. So, oh my God, I mean, me and my business partner, fellow Marine, we're looking at each other like, what the hell are we going to do here? Who do we pay?
Right.
Payroll's coming up, and who do we pay? The good thing about getting through that was, obviously you pay your employees, and then, more than ever, you're leaning on personal relationships. So like I buy lights from distributors. I buy lights from, I have a referral relationship with Granger, who is a big company. So, you owe all these people money. And so, they know what's going on, and they knew, they weren't getting paid by other people too, I'm sure. But it's just like, hey, I'm sorry, like I'm not getting paid by these people. I can't finish this job. I know I owe you this money, but if you've been in business for several years and you've been paying on time, and, you develop, relationships with these people, they say, hey, we know you're going to pay, like, we'll let it go. And I don't, it was tough to get through, but I don't think I had one distributor or manufacturer, or vendor of mine that, was on my throat, to get paid. And it's because we were all going through the same thing, we're all going through it together. PPP money, helped out. So obviously the federal government offering assistance to small businesses was a big thing for us. That got us through, and now, things are mostly opening back up. So this year, we're going to have a good to better than good year. And I hope that just stays around, baby. Let's just keep going.
Keep riding that. Yeah. The point you made a second ago, cash flow, and it just makes me think of just, the monitoring that AR aging report, right? Is just like, like when do I, it just that balance of like, okay, I have suppliers that I need to pay, but I also have terms, net 30, net 60, whatever the terms might look like for projects. And so like balancing that out and trying to work it the opposite direction, right? It's like, hey, let me get my suppliers on net 60 terms, right? Not like they ever would.
Yeah,
right?
not like they would, but yeah, exactly. And that's a constant game, constant skill set. And I actually, over time we have a controller now, and that's a skill set that she has. She's always working on negotiating better terms for us, and working on getting us paid. And I would say that's the worst part of my job, is having to call people and ask them for money. And talk about like getting over something and not wanting to annoy people. Like I was like, man, this guy owes me money. I got to call him and like ask for it now. Come on.
Yeah.
But that's just the name of the game.
Yeah. But like you're making such a great point though, is when like it really makes it real when you've got your own bills to pay, you've got your own families, your own employees, your own, like, so there's a lot riding on it. So it's not, so now and that's probably what helped break some of that, like, apprehension about addressing this. It's like, hey, look, we've got real needs to me. Like, I'm not just like trying to clobber people upside the head because I'm trying to make my net profit. My net margins look really, really nice this quarter. It's like I've got real I got real issues I need to
Oh,
solve.
it's motivating. The
Yeah,
phone's ringing and like you recognize the number and you're like, oh man, they're asking me for the money that this dude owes me. I don't even have it. Yeah, it's a motivator. But again, like, you don't want to call angry,
exactly, exactly
and
right. Yep.
it's hard, especially for guys maybe like us that, if I'll get annoyed. I'll get angry. I'm like, yo, what's going on here? It's 45 days. You told me you're going to pay me 15 days ago. And that just never works out, and,
Yeah.
and so that's another thing I've had to do over time is like, sometimes I'll write an email. I'll know like I'm feeling, whatever. I'll
Yeah.
write the email and then I'll leave it. Yeah. And then I'll go back the next day and I'll read it and I'll be like, no, we're going to just erase this part. We're going to edit this little area.
Yeah.
But again, like, know yourself, seek self-improvement. Like, don't make
Sure.
those phone calls, when you're angry.
Sure.
And
No,
again, there's a right way. There's a right way
yep.
to say that to people.
Yep.
Hey, I know you're busy and doing other things, but I'm just checking on this invoice. Have you sent a check yet?
Yep.
Something innocuous.
Right. Yeah. Something where it's not gonna become a fist fight over the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Pay the bills.
That just doesn't help anybody out. But all right. So we covered some of the challenging aspect of the business. I would love to just to hear from you. What's one of your proudest achievements? Like, what's one of the things that you've just like, you know what? I'm so proud of our team, so proud of this company for what we've done here.
Man, I mean, I guess the thing I like the most, or I just appreciate the most, is that we have all these employees. Like, we've had people now with us for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And it's about us, like we have a core group of people that, that we're saving. I look at it like we're saving. Yeah, for 2 years, I worked for that company in a office with 200 people and 200 cubicles. And I like CBRE. I love the people that I worked with there. I knew that wasn't the environment, for me. And I know that there's a lot of people that are in that, they're maybe not now because of the pandemic. And I hope that, mobile working, takes off and
Sure.
stays with us. But back then, I mean, 80% of the workforce, sitting in a cubicle or something. So I kind of look at it like I'm, the company is saving us all from that, from that life, and leaving my, like my dad, he'd leave the house at 6 a.m. and get home at 7 p.m. And, he wouldn't see us leave for school. And, he'd try to get home before we went to bed. And I now have friends that are doing that stuff. And I know we work hard, and there's some days where we are, extending our hours or working weekends, and the hustle. But
Sure.
But families takes priority. If somebody, it's not like we don't have like time off when someone wants to leave. It's like, take time off.
Yeah.
So I like that part of it. It's something that we're all, doing together to save ourselves from, working, a terrible 9 to 5 or working for a terrible boss. Hopefully most of them don't think they have a terrible boss, but something along those lines. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I was able to, and like I started it, here we are 10 years later. I've had a lot of help. The company's been on the back of a lot of different people that weren't me, in that time. Guys closing big deals, guys getting projects done, faster, and so we can move on to something. And so it feels like our company, now.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it felt like my company, and that's something I'm proud of. It's
Cool.
it's something that I think my employees, feel like they, love being a part of.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I mean, being able to look back and see like, wow, 10 years later, we got some of the same faces here, and we both like being able to see each other.
Yeah. I mean, and, try to have the conversation every year, and how the Marine Corps is like, you want to sit down with people and make sure that you understand their wants and needs, because they adjust over time. And so do mine. So do the company's, wants and needs. And so we always make sure that it's married up. And, I care to make sure that my employees feel like they're paid what they're worth. So we talk about that. I don't want that to be like a thing in the background that's not, open. And I always tell them, like, if you think you deserve more money, then come tell me why, and I'll pay you more money. If you're doing more work and you think you're adding more value, then come at me with a reason why, and I'm here to talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so looking back on it now, like, I would love to just to hear from you. And again, I know we've probably covered elements of this in different segments that we've already done, but looking back, knowing what you know now, like what advice would you give yourself the 10 years ago version of what you've seen, and maybe different things that you might change, or things that you shouldn't worry about, or things that you should focus on? Like what would that look like?
It's a really good question. I mean, I'd change a lot because, like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes. Hiring, like on the operations side, I think I've done a decent job hiring, but on the sales side, I don't think I've done a great job hiring or motivating. I think that's been a leadership failure of mine over the years. But hiring, just not necessarily better people. I hired good people, and that worked hard, but I think I could have hired different people that maybe could have been more effective, or motivated them differently, or paid them differently or something.
Sure.
But in the beginning, I didn't do a good job of that. I definitely would change that. I think anybody would tell you that's the hardest part of running and owning a business is hiring people. A better knowledge of financials. I'm just a dumb Marine, and math for Marines is about as complex as I like to get. Yeah. And so, when you're talking about a balance sheet, income statement, you said it earlier, net profit, and these things are obviously things that we know, right now, but 10 years ago when I was starting the company, and I have a business degree and a business management degree from Quincy University. But, there's just things that I like when you're talking to bankers, like I didn't know back then. And so it's things that you can learn, things that you can read about and learn. And I just, I was more like OJT guy and putting my head down and hustling and, knocking on doors and making phone calls. And I was so focused on that, we talked about earlier how when it ramps up, you want to hire people. Well, when it ramps up, the more money is coming in. More money, more problems, it's where does this go out? And then at the end of the year, it's like, well, I didn't even have QuickBooks, so then it was like, oh my God, I got to hire somebody to get my, and so I was way behind on all that stuff. And I ended up hiring somebody off of Craigslist that really didn't do a good job, like setting up my books, and then years later, so then we're doing, I think we did year 2, $1 million. And then we were 2 million, and then maybe 3.5, so we were growing pretty well every year. And maybe like 4 years into it, I had to let that person go and then hire somebody to rebuild my books from back, day one, till present. Dang. And, that was time consuming. It was expensive, and it's something that I could have saved myself from if I had just done either A, hire the right person, or B, known more about it so I could manage the person that I did hire, better.
Sure.
So, I mean, dude, I could go on and on about it.
No, it's good. It's good. No, and that's not at all meant to be like a walk of shame at all whatsoever, man.
Here we are, somehow I still managed to get us here 10 years later. We're profitable. So, and it's not, I like my business partner is the brains of the operation, and he's the guy you should have on next. And he's in Fort Worth, actually.
Oh, wow.
I hear you say, you're there, right?
I am. We'll have to offline. We'll have to coordinate that. That's super cool. Well, let me just pull up your website. So the best way for people to get a hold of you or to learn more about the company would be greenlightnational.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Check out greenlightnational.com. We've got a LinkedIn page. We've got a Facebook page. And then, to get a hold of me, I mean, we've got, just a normal email address on the website, but if you put me on there, I'll get it. So there's only 20 of us over here. So
nice.
It'll filter to me. No problem.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I mean, before we go, was there anything else? Was there anything else that you wanted to share that we just didn't have time to circle back to, or did you have any other lingering thoughts?
Nothing other than to A, thank you for having me on, and then B, just I offer my assistance to anybody listening that is thinking about starting a business or has some questions, or if you're out there and you think you could give me advice, I'll take it. But yeah, just doing that, and like I said, I'm you can get me, on any of our LinkedIn page, Facebook page, or website. But yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, Aaron. It's been a real honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Mike. Thank you again so much. Thanks for listening to America's Entrepreneur. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review or comment on your preferred social media platform. Share it out with friends, family, coworkers, others in your network. And of course, you can write me directly at aaron@boldmedia.us. That's aaron@boldmedia.us. Until next time.